We hebben ook vandaag op het podium Ludivine Verbogen. She's a lawyer. She's the founder of 101 Genome Foundation. She's also the vice president of Radio.org, the umbrella association of rare disease patients organizations, and she is above all the mother of Aurélien, who has the Marfan syndrome. Voilà, ils sont déjà sur scène, j'allais vous demander de la ils sont rapides. Voilà, on peut quand même les applaudir. On a tous les trois un micro, donc ça c'est bien. Je commence par vous, Pierre Van der Hagen, professeur Van der Hagen. Alors la recherche fondamentale est extrêmement importante pour les maladies, je dirais en général, mais encore plus pour les maladies rares et pour les patients et pour leur qualité de vie. Alors ça a l'air peut-être un peu une question bateau générale, mais quand même. Why? Why is this so important, and maybe even more important for rare diseases than for other diseases?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So I think, as often scientists like to say, you can only fix what you understand, or at least to understand something is often the best way to fix anything. So that's why basic science is so important. Understand basically all the complexity of biology as a first and essential step to develop new medicine. Now, when it comes to rare disease, I think it's in a way the last frontier of medicine. It's a collection of diseases on which the gap of knowledge is huge. Sometimes, we were discussing this earlier, sometimes so huge that in fact almost nothing is known. And so this is where basically basic scientists are at best, is when they are facing a blank slate, a complete unknown territory, and just engage into it and try to discover what's going on. So
when you say that nothing is known or hardly anything is known, it is of course because we are talking about a rare disease.
Yes, because usually these are the ones that are poorly studied, not that they're not well studied, but studied by too few people with too little means also to actually tackle them, because biomedicine research, as we all know, costs a lot of money. And so I think it's in that sense that it's, even though of course I'm a little bit biased here, but I think it is very smart of the Generet Foundation to fund also basic science with the longer term to cure any type of rare disease.
Now you just said it in a different way, but during our interview before, to prepare this, you said you can only cure what you understand. And that sounds, of course, very logical. Now, to make sure that we all know what we're talking about, because you're talking about clinical research, fundamental research, what is exactly the difference between all these type of researches?
I think the differences are often blurry. I mean, I think we are often in a gray zone, and I think it is this gray zone that is actually quite interesting. And I think in the frame of many of the projects funded by the foundation, we are actually basic scientists in the lab, but also working together with clinicians, working and interacting directly with patients. And I think it is in this gray zone, if I may allow myself to say that light comes out actually from the interactions between people with very different perspectives, but who actually are aiming towards the same goal, which is to understand the disease in order to find a cure.
And then maybe another question, the difference between a rare disease and an orphelin et rare. It's very...
that's a really tough one. And
securing, because I thought maybe that's a stupid question, but no, if you cannot answer it, then I guess, or it's difficult to answer, then it's maybe not such a...
I'm sure Wikipedia could help us. But I guess what I think the key thing is, not many patients are affected by rare diseases. Because of that, the gap of knowledge is huge, and these diseases are, quote unquote, orphaned of enough knowledge to get to the treatment. And I guess in that sense, they're a little bit synonymous.
Okay, now you don't know each other, but it's an amazing story actually. Ludivine, you created, and I have to look at my paper, la Fondation Fonds Generet. Tell us, why What was the trigger to create this foundation?
Thank you very much, Marlene. First of all, I would like to congratulate Pierre and all the Generet Prize winners for the amazing work they do in rare disease. And as the Vice President of Radiorg and a representative of a patient, rare disease patient in Belgium, I would like to thank warmly the Generet Fund to allow this research on rare disease to exist. So, I am a representative of patient because we had a son, my husband and I, in 2015. So we have 3 kids, and when our last one was born, it was very soon clear that he was affected with a rare disease called Marfan syndrome.
Marfan syndrome.
Yes. It's a connective tissue disorder that affects mainly bones, eyes, and the heart, unfortunately, and it can be deadly. And unfortunately for our little boy, it appears that he had early onset Marfan, which is a very severe form of Marfan syndrome. And according to some statistics, he had 16 months life expectancy. So of course we were completely devastated by this news, but it also was like an electroshock for us. So we went back to see the geneticist that diagnosed our son, and we were talking to him for hours about what we could do to help speed up the research into Marfan syndrome. And so out of this discussion it came out that there was a missing tool that could really help speed up the research in Marfan syndrome, and it was a genomic database of Marfan patients.
So it's actually a database that you created?
Absolutely. We created a genomic database. We have now 60 Marfan genomes on our database, and we have bioinformaticians working on this database trying to find protective genes that would counteract the effect of the pathogenous mutation, of the Marfan mutation. And we started this quest of protected genes with scientific committee that we gathered with the biggest specialists of Marfan syndrome in France and in Belgium. And we started the GEMS study, which is the quest for protective genes I just told you about. And this study is co-led by Professor Bart Lewis from Antwerp and Professor Paul Cook from Ghent.
And you also told me that it is important to break the barriers and to break the gap between the researchers and the patients.
Absolutely.
Why is that important?
Yeah, from the beginning of our action, we wanted to broaden the spectrum of the research. Bioinformatic research is not a replacement for, but it's a complement to wet lab research. So research on animals and fish, etc., or on human cells reconstituted. So, for example, if a researcher finds an interesting area for protective genes in his wet lab, so on animals or human tissues, he could verify this finding in computerized genomes that we have on our platform, and that would broaden the spectrum of the fundamental research. And also we wanted to break down the silos, because we know all researchers, they have their fundings and they have their researches, but sometimes they work in their corner, and what we wanted to say is, come work on our genomes, all researchers are welcome. We started with a pilot project on Marfan syndrome because it's the syndrome of our son, but now that the platform exists, we can open it to other rare diseases.
How's your son doing?
He's doing well. He's 7 years old now, very happy at school, and he's doing good. Thank you.
Ceci, c'est un cadeau presque tombé du ciel, hein, Professor Van der Hagen. It actually emphasizes, I think, the importance of this strong teamwork between researchers and patients and the family of patients.
Yes, I must say I'm so impressed. I'm so so you know, I work on the brain, on the developing brain, and often people like to understand or explain the complexity of the brain as a collection of small parts, some of which are quote-unquote rational, and then others are quote-unquote emotional. I think it's a complete mistake, and I think we had a very nice and impressive demonstration that, you know, rationality, emotionality, being intelligent, and at the same time being in difficulties. You know, this is all part of what our brains are facing, and I think this is perhaps the most important lesson that, you know, we as officially rational scientists can learn from officially emotional patients, is that we are actually, you know, on the same boat in that sense, and having and facing the same challenges, obviously in a different way. But I think in that sense it opens our eyes, in the sense that it allows us, or in that sense, speaking of myself, me, to have curiosity as the main drive, as always, but on top of that, having the motivation to overcome challenges that would perhaps will do real good, yes, both rationally and emotionally.
Now we have a timekeeper here in the audience, and she's giving me lots of signs. So I just want to have a takeaway message for researchers, for patients, in one sentence, if possible, or in two. Same for you. Is that possible? You can start.
Let's work on rare diseases. And let's all apply to the Generet Fund, except those who already done.
Yes. And you, a takeaway message?
My takeaway message would be that patients and researchers have to work hands by hands. I mean, researchers bring tremendous hope for patients, and because a cure can change the lives of thousands of children and adults with rare disease. But I think also that patients have really, if they have the energy, and they can be really a key actor of change in research, because they know the disease so well, because they live with it on a daily basis, but also they can make the change that researchers.
I wish you a lot of luck. Thank you very much, Ludivine Verbogen and Pierre van der Haag. Now we're going to 2021 laureate Rosa Rademakers.